Gameranx presents another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our thoughts on the latest games releasing. As always, it's me, your guide, Jake Baldino. I'm still sick. I apologize for my crappy voice. I know I've been sick for a long time. I guess I've just been playing too many games. I don't know. But today we're talking about, yeah, you guessed it, Mass Effect Andromeda. Look, this is a difficult game to talk about. It's a polarizing series for a multitude of reasons, not to mention social and political ones. It almost seems like a lot of people are rooting for this game to be bad. But for me, I'm just here to talk about the game itself, what it has, and whether or not I think it's good. That's all my job really is, and that's what I'm gonna do. The bigger issue here is fan expectations and that extremely high bar Mass Effect has set. Despite that snafu with the ending of Mass Effect 3, the originals trilogy has a massive amount of respect from gaming fans, and that puts Andromeda in a very difficult place. This is a substantial game, one that does manage to hold the weight of the series on its shoulders. It just doesn't feel anywhere near as inspired. And for some, I think that might be the biggest offense. Strap in though, this one is going to be as comprehensive and exhaustive as I can make it. First things first, let's acknowledge the facial animation and all those bugs that you've seen probably meme to all hell across the internet by now. This is by far and away one of the worst aspects of the game. Did the original Mass Effect have some jank to it? You betcha. I think people do forget about that. Do you get used to some of the weirdness? Yeah, but personally, I still think it's distracting, and it'll take you out of some important conversations. Something that you do a lot in a Mass Effect game. It won't bother all, but I need to make note that it bothered me. The game feels unpolished in spots. I wanted this out of the way because it can definitely make or break it for some, and some may walk away from it right now. Otherwise, the game doesn't look half bad. Performance-wise, on a GTX 980 Ti, the game ran fine, but on a PS4 Pro, where this footage is recorded, the frame rate wasn't always perfect, so definitely take note. Sorry to start off on a negative foot, but I do want to talk about the best thing Andromeda has going for it, and that is the core gameplay. Combat is fast, frenetic, and designed to encourage the player to really take advantage of the tech and biotic powers now more than the previous games. I found myself doing a lot more and exploring a lot more of the aspects and abilities in this game than I did in any other Mass Effect game before it. Despite only having really 3 mappable powers, which is kind of disappointing, they're all really effective and they feel polished and they have uses for every situation. There's room for some experimentation and combining abilities, which I totally love. That added mobility with the jump jets allow you to dash, dodge, and shoot up into the air, adding not only more speed to the encounters, but more verticality, which I think was totally needed, and it's awesome. Shooting just feels punchier, the guns sound loud and real, the sound design is great, and the melee attacks aren't totally soft. You can get different things besides the Omni Tool blade later on, like swords. I actually found myself enjoying every single combat encounter, especially later in the game when you're fighting large evil things. The more things get ambitious with combat encounters, the better the game gets, and it's all pretty exciting and fun. It's especially apparent once you get past the opening act. I will say, this game has a super slow opener that's going to turn a lot of people off. Things don't really amp up until maybe past the first 6 hours, depending on your play speed. Thankfully, though, the game doesn't seem to lose its RPG roots. There's plenty of systems and upgrades to go through, and you'll find yourself feeling a little bit lost, but I think that's a good thing. Character progression here, which was very important to me, does feel nice. I enjoy not choosing one particular class. Andromeda actually lets you flesh out abilities whenever and wherever you see fit, and not just limit it to a specific class. You can unlock and equip these profiles that give you stat bonuses to particular preferences, though, and it's not as big of a deal as it sounds, but it's a nice bonus. You can choose the upgrades as you level up your teammates too, but unfortunately that's about it. Everything else with team members is disappointing in the sense that it's all streamlined now. You can't give them anything, and you can only give them basic, go here for a minute, commands in the field. There's lots of buying and selling, crafting, and research as you would probably expect from a game like this. It's all surprisingly deep, and will keep you busy buried in menus for a while. It's not the nicest laid out or the easiest to navigate, but hey, it's an RPG. You'll definitely find yourself crafting to your heart's content, always gathering resources in the hopes of making, like a badass new shotgun or armor piece or something. And briefly, since I mentioned armor, it's customizable enough to make up for the disappointing character creator. Character creation is kind of a buzzkill here. It's super not in-depth. My guy kind of looks like a big dumb idiot, but I dealt with it. I still think it looks better than the default. But in terms of playing and developing a character, with all the upgrades and the systems going on, it managed to feel rewarding, and that's what I was looking for, and that's what kept me playing. The setup of Andromeda is interesting enough. Before the events of Mass Effect 2, this initiative organizes tens of thousands of volunteers that are looking for a new life to be placed in cryosleep and sent across space to a new galaxy in search of a new home. After floating around in cryosleep, 600 years later, you're awakened as the Pathfinder. And after arriving in the Andromeda galaxy, it's time for you to forge this new path and find a new home. It's surprisingly heavy, important stuff where your decisions actually feel important sometimes, as literally everyone in the game looks to you and your leadership. The gravity of it all feels pretty well realized, but surprisingly enough, The tone here is for the most part extremely lighthearted. You're not fighting a war for humanity. You're not on a suicide mission. You're actually explorers first. You're literal colonists who decided to leave behind life in the Milky Way to go find new life and tons of adventure. It's honestly very, very different from what we've seen in a sci-fi game. There's a lot of emphasis on exploration and discovery. You're either gonna love it or you're gonna feel unfazed by it. While I'm enjoying it, there's no denying it feels nowhere near as inspired as the original trilogy, and I think, like I said earlier in the intro, that's the biggest sin the game makes. While I said the premise is unique, the actual adventure itself falls a bit flat, at least in the main quests and the places you see. Highlights include discovering and meeting entirely new races for the first time, but low points are the generic villains and ancient remnant threats that are these evil ancient robots, and so many sequences in the game give you the equivalent of repetitive platforming puzzle dungeons with annoying Sudoku puzzles to solve in order to open doors. I'm not shitting you. Sudoku puzzles, yes. While the Archon, the main villain, doesn't completely flop, parts of the adventure truly just feel like just another Mass Effect thing. It feels a bit like a B-tier Mass Effect adventure, you know what I mean? And moving on to the characters make or break Mass Effect games for some, and I don't think they're a complete failure here. If anything, Andromeda gives you even more time and more dialogue to get to know your crewmates. And their loyalty missions are pretty great. They may not look the most interesting or unique, but once you dive in, they have some nice quirks and stories. I didn't feel as deeply attached as I was hoping, but I by no means hated the characters. I think that's almost like an inevitable. It's like a given. You know, you like the original Star Wars trilogy characters. There's no way you're gonna like any characters in newer Star Wars more so than the original Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia. They're interesting enough, and the amount of dialogue and conversations you can have did make me look forward to walking around the ship and talking to all my friends. And plus, you can flirt and have sex with a lot of them too. It's almost obnoxious. So if you're looking for space sex, you got plenty of that here. The main character though, Ryder, either male or female, seems generic, but more personable than Shepard. The male character isn't portrayed by Nolan North, but he sounds exactly like Nathan Drake, even down to his sarcasm and his enthusiasm, which really personally bothers me, but I think it brings that whole lighthearted tone full circle. But considering his sarcasm and his enthusiasm and his niceness, for me, what was glaringly missing is the Paragon Renegade system. Things are more gray area now, which is admirable, but I can't help but miss it. Maybe it's just me. I just felt like throughout the course of the adventure, except for key sequences, my dialogue choices and actions didn't really make much of a difference. Besides setting up settlements and changes in the Nexus, you know, in terms of the course for humanity, other than that, my decisions didn't really feel like much. A lot of dialogue choices boiled down to either be nice or be a bit sarcastic, and that was disappointing. Systems-wise, you're slowly developing outposts on worlds and watching them grow and developing and improving the Nexus, which is like the Citadel, and that's where you see most decisions come alive. But still, besides those, I just couldn't help but feel disappointed. Worlds themselves and space exploration is pretty awesome. There's an overwhelming amount of open spaces and hubs and cities and environments to explore, riddled with side quests, thankfully most of which don't totally suck, but some can feel like a bit of a chore after a while. The game gives you a surprising amount of planets and areas to explore, as well as roughly 4 larger open world type environment planets. This is where the Mass Effect formula really changes, but somewhat for the better. Thanks to this Nomad, this new version of the Mako off-road vehicle from the original game, it makes exploring pretty damn fun. Upgrading and then controlling the Nomad is fun, and climbing up mountains with its all-wheel drive mode and boosting and hitting jumps and stuff. It all makes for a good time as you explore these giant places, mining for resources and taking out outposts, and just improving quality of life on whatever planet you're on. There's also a multiplayer mode, which I think will satisfy the fans of Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. Yes, there was a fan base for that. I was very surprised myself. I don't go into these games for multiplayer, but the mode is like a horde mode and it's competent enough. And surprisingly enough, the way they integrate it into single player this time around is pretty neat. It's simple, it's not required, but it's clever. Keep in mind, I do want to point it out though, because it does bother some people, multiplayer does have microtransactions in it. So if you can't tell, there's a lot of good and disappointing things about Mass Effect Andromeda. It's hard to decide what to think. But don't let the GIFs and images online fool you. This isn't a terrible game at all. And I think Mass Effect fans will find a lot of engaging stuff to sink their teeth into. Playing it is fun, but the experience around gameplay itself comes off as less than memorable. Does that make sense? Like I said earlier, it comes off as a B-tier Mass Effect adventure. It's good, but not quite up to the originals. You know, it's a stronger, bigger, fun, more playable Mass Effect than ever, but it lost some of what made the series special in the first place. I do really think, though, if there's a Mass Effect Andromeda 2, they'll really knock it out of the park, and that will be an awesome game. But guys, that's how a Before You Buy works. I give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion, and now I definitely want to hear yours in the comments, because I know everyone has something to say about this game. Everyone wants to hate on it or absolutely love it, so I do want to hear from you down in the comments what you think, whether you played the trial, or you dived into the new game today upon release. What are you thinking so far? I truly think if you push past the opening hours, you'll find it a bit more fun. Let's talk about anything Mass Effect Andromeda down in the comments below. I'll be there as much as possible if you got any questions, but I'll also be on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Jake Baldino as well. Thanks as always for coming around for these before you buy videos. You know, clicking the like button helps us out a ton, and if for some reason you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we put out stuff every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Cat cap spotted.